Welcome to everyone with us this afternoon and those of you joining us via our recording. We have one question posted this week, which Carol posted. And Carol would like to work on some performance anxiety that she has been experiencing related to her study of the vibraphone. She had talked about getting distracted and making mistakes while playing. Happens for her when she's having a music lesson. That's improving. But she has some fears about getting distracted or losing her place when she's playing for other people. So I had suggested to Carol sometime back that if she wanted to use this venue to do some exposure to those fears, I thought that would be a good use of our time there. And I wondered, Carol, if we started with a little measurement here, you had agreed that you would play the vibraphone for us here this afternoon. And I'm wondering how anxious you're feeling right now.
Like on a 1 to 10 scale or 1 to 100 scale? How do you mean?
Either one, yeah.
Okay, so let's do 1 to 10. I would say I'm at about a 7.5 or 8.
My guess was going to be 7. So I don't know how we know these things, but maybe putting myself in your shoes, I thought, yeah, I'd be about a 7. But maybe 7.5 would be your number. And are there other emotions that you're aware of feeling right now, positive, negative?
Well, I would say a little bit excited just for the opportunity.
Did we measure
I would say, yeah, I'd put that at maybe like a 5. I'd say I'm a little, well, it goes under the anxious categories, probably like a little bit apprehensive or embarrassed in advance of the mistakes I'm going to make. Feeling a little, we don't normally measure this, but I feel a little vulnerable.
Could we get a number for embarrassment?
Embarrassed, probably a 6.
And vulnerability?
Probably a 5. Maybe just frustration that I have this problem in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd probably give that about an 8.
That would be the highest score.
Yeah.
Okay. So for our conversation earlier, I'm feeling more dialed in to how Carol is feeling, given that she has given us both the names of these feelings and a number. So knowing that you're feeling 80% frustrated with yourself, 7.5% anxious, and so forth, makes me actually feel closeness to you, because I have struggled with performance anxiety when it comes to playing musical instruments, and I think my numbers would likely have been in the ballpark of what you're describing as well. I'm also experiencing that excitement because it seems to me that you're pretty motivated to reset your relationship to performance. And it's exciting for me to think about supporting you in doing this well. Maybe we could also set some goals here. Going forward, after today, how much anxiety would you want to and feel in advance of performing the vibraphone?
Well, I wouldn't want to say 0, because I do think you kind of have to be a little on, kind of helps you stay sharp and kind of acutely aware. So I'd say maybe a 1 or 2.
Call that a 1.5.
Yeah.
How much excitement would you want to experience?
That number could probably be higher. But I don't want too much excitement because you could lose concentration. So maybe a 4.
Dial that down a little bit. How much embarrassment?
0.
How much vulnerability?
Well, I do think you have to have vulnerability when you're doing music, right? You can't do it without.
Yeah.
So I would say, like, that's not necessarily a bad thing if you're performing, unless it impedes. So I'd say maybe a 3.
And how much frustration with yourself?
I mean, if I make mistakes, I'll experience some frustration. So, but I don't want to be so frustrated that I don't try, or that I'm assuming that I'll always make a bunch of mistakes. So I'd say I'm 1.
Think of frustration as being a very neutral emotion. We observe it in, all vertebrates trying to get something and feeling thwarted. Dogs or birds will exhibit frustration behavior. Vulnerability, too, when we drill down and look a little more closely, I think what we find there is it's a form of anxiety, and we're fearing others' judgments. That's we might be happy to lose. I don't want to walk around fearing other people, saying, "Oh my God, she made another mistake. What is going on with her?" That might not add any value to our performance career. But the exposure, people will now see my level of skill with this instrument. And as you're suggesting, John, that just comes with the territory. We wouldn't sign up to perform if we weren't interested in exposure, having people see how we are with a vibraphone or singing voice or guitar or something like that. So I'm also seeing the frustration probably hardwired into the anxiety. I'm rejecting myself. I'm not right. I shouldn't have this problem. And then we would project the self-rejection into other people's brains and be afraid of other people rejecting us. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
What you might be up to there. Yeah, the core of anxiety is self-rejection. If we're okay with ourselves, including performing well, making errors, whatever it would be, we're not going to be anxious because we'll be projecting self-acceptance into other people's brains and be thinking, oh, people are probably going to be fine knowing how I am. So that's the root of the thing, setting up what Karen Horney called the idealized self, the self who does not make errors. That's when the trouble starts, on the anxiety, the social anxiety, the performance anxiety. Yeah, I know that well from having been studying the violin, played through college, did recitals, did orchestral work. So I understand something about that experience of, oh my God, they're all looking, they're all listening. And with the violin, it really is an extension of yourself. Anything you're feeling will show up in the tone. I don't know if that happens with a vibraphone or not, but it's different than a piano or something where there's a little more distance between the body and the instrument. Maybe just check in, empathy side. Are you feeling like I'm getting where you're at? Am I missing some things? How are you feeling about the empathy that I'm providing you?
Good. I mean, some of it is just kind of good information that kind of helps me look at things a little more objectively or realistically, like kind of things that come with the territory, as you said. It's kind of a natural response to stress, to be anxious, that kind of thing. So yeah, I would say I give you a B+.
Mm-hmm. And what is missing? What would bring it up into the A range?
Good question. Maybe some stroking, maybe more. You did really good on your I feel and relating to what I was experiencing. Probably maybe just more stroking.
Yeah.
I was thinking before this, I wanted everyone to know that, it takes some courage to do this, right? And there was two factors. One is, okay, I'm asking my patients to have courage all the time, right? So I have to be able to be in situations where I require myself of courage. And same thing if we're teaching, right? We have to have that courage. The other thing is that what is so crucial, I'm realizing in this process, is trust, right? So if I didn't have trust in Daniel that this was going to help me in some way, or that he was going to get me through no matter how emotional I got, there was no way I would sign up for it. So I just want to emphasize that, because I do think as therapists, we kind of assume, or, we're ready to go, and may not realize if there's elements there missing, our patients aren't going to be on board. They're not going to be able to really, dive deep and do the thing that's scary for them, whether it's, induct the panic sensation or do exposure work. They're not going to go there. The trust has to be very well formed. So I think in team, we talk a lot about the relationship and getting those good empathy scores. And I think that really comes to light when you're on the receiving side, right? You're on the receiving side of any kind of treatment. So I just want to emphasize that.
Yeah, thanks, Carol, for all of that feedback. I wonder, would any of our colleagues here today want to offer Carol a bit of stroking for her choice to use our platform as an exposure platform?
Carol, I just want to tell you that I am in awe of you. I I don't think I would have the courage to do it. I also get performance anxiety, and I had to perform or get up and give a little tiny 3-line speech. I was very anxious, and I flubbed the whole thing in front of all my family and my friends because I let the anxiety get the better of me. So I really have a lot of respect for you that you're willing to be so vulnerable and do this in front of us. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. That means a lot. I loved hearing that. I'm sorry you had, difficulty in experience that anxiety. It's not fun to be in that situation. It really is not.
Carol, I just want to say I'm inspired and awed by your courage. I have been taking piano lessons, and the anxiety levels I feel just having a lesson on Zoom with my teacher, who is actually about 12 years old, my knees knock. I just sweat, and my mind goes sort of far away and don't connect to my fingers. So the fact that you're here with us is inspiring. It's really inspiring. So thank you so much for doing this. Really, it's wonderful.
Thanks. I've only been playing for about 6 months. So, I've done music in the past on other instruments. So, but this is a whole nother animal. And I don't have any of the, the stair-step practice, like when you're younger and you're a kid and you're learning, and, but to come in as an adult is kind of a totally different thing on a different instrument. So, yeah, it's a steep learning curve. Let's put it that way.
I wonder if we could do 2 more measurement pieces here, Carol. One, how are we as a group doing on the empathy front now that we've had the opportunity to add some stroking?
Oh, very well. I'd say I'd give an A.
I'd also love to measure how anxious you're feeling right now.
I'm still pretty anxious. I'd say probably at a 7.
Okay. How safe are you feeling right now?
Oh, safe. I'd say about a 5.
And how trusting are you feeling of our process, of me, of our group?
I'd say about an 8.
So when we're doing exposure, when we want to address anxiety, you say you'd like to come down from 7.5 to 1.5 when you think about doing this going forward. We would want to do some testing, do some empathy, establish there's enough safety and trust in the air to proceed. And then probably we'd do some cognitive work, and we'd identify the thoughts that are creating anxiety. We know that playing the vibraphone does not create anxiety, but what we'll say to ourselves about it very well could. And we could set that out, do some cognitive therapy to kind of soften things up with that. And then if that went reasonably well, we could move on to doing some imaginal exposure, where you would imagine playing the vibraphone, probably imagine making mistakes or getting distracted or getting lost, to again help you start to settle into something that's a reality, I think, for everyone who performs music. We sometimes get distracted or lose our place or make errors. And so that could further desensitize you to the trigger. We could set up a feared fantasy where you would make errors and people would say to you the things you'd be most fearful of hearing. Be another form of imaginal exposure to performance anxiety. And if all of that went reasonably well, we could move on to doing some in vivo exposure, which would be performing for an audience itself. So anytime we carve out a part of the model and say, I'm going to do the in vivo exposure, we are fast forwarding through everything, including some agenda setting that would argue in favor of staying at 7.5 on anxiety instead of going down to 1.5. You're a highly skilled professional person and someone who teaches CBT. So we could just ask you, do we want to do any of that other stuff before we move on to in vivo exposure? Or is your sense that, no, I'm a candidate to just do the in vivo exposure right now?
Well, thanks for the option. I wish I could just go to in vivo, but I'm a little trepidatious still. So I'd probably want to do some work like the feared fantasy or the imaginal exposure first.
Great. Thanks for letting us know. There is some agenda setting or some imaginal work that would come first. What would be the things that you would be afraid that we would be thinking as we listen to you make errors on the microphone?
Mostly has to do with like ability. So the judgment, like, oh, she's not that good, or she's never going to get.
Everyone write this down so we can give these back to Carol. She's not that good.
Yeah.
What?
She'll probably never get that good in order to really perform in any kind of, setting with an audience, outside of friends or family.
Great. She'll probably never get that good to really perform in any kind of setting with an audience outside family and friends.
Mm-hmm.
What else would we be thinking that you would be afraid of hearing us say?
This is kind of a silly thing for older women to do,
Any other criticisms or judgments you'd be afraid?
I think that captures most of it. I'll let you know if I come up with something else.
Yeah, okay. And maybe here, per our discussion a little earlier, this cognitive work is another form of empathy. So for Carol to tell us I'm anxious at 7.5, that gives us a lot of information. But raise your hand if you feel closer to Carol after hearing the specific things she would be afraid of our thinking. She's not that good. Yeah, me too. So the cognitive work, we could call this a method, writing down our negative thoughts, is also a form of empathy. When we get to that particular cognition, we understand each other better. I might have very different thoughts related to performance anxiety. So understanding Carol's thoughts helps us understand Carol, which is always a wonderful experience. Understand our wonderful colleague. So, Carol, would it be okay if we just round robin here and invited our members to give you these thoughts and give you the opportunity to respond to them?
Sure, let's go for it.
Let's go for it. So go ahead and just unmute, and we're going to use the second person pronoun here. So we'll be telling Carol, you're not that good. You'll probably never get that good. This is really silly.
Frankly, what a silly thing for an older woman to do.
Yeah, it is kind of silly. It's not like I'm going to become some kind of master, vibraphone player and be like Gary Burton, who was a famous performer. But that's okay. I just always love the instrument. And I want to be able to know, hey, could I play this thing? Because it's just a really fun, different instrument. And if I could do something halfway decent, nothing super complicated, and enjoy it, and even if I only play for family or friends, well, that's not so bad. It's been good for my brain to try to take on this challenge. But yeah, it's a bit silly. I'm spending money, renting the instrument and playing, taking lessons. But it gets me up out of the chair at night, and instead of just watching TV, makes my brain work. And sometimes I have a good time when I do a song fairly well, and that's kind of satisfying. So I'll just do it, even if it's silly.
But Carol, you know what? You're really not that good.
I'm not, actually. I make a lot of mistakes. It's a hard instrument because there's 4 mallets, so you can do some songs with 2 and some with 4. And it's different. You can't feel where your hands are like you can on a piano. I played flute for years. You don't have to look at your fingers. You can feel it. So to look at the music and then look down and look up, and then all of a sudden, like, you either don't know where the key is you need to hit, or you don't know what note you're on looking up at the thing because you lost your place. So maybe I'll never get that great, but that's worth a try. I've only tried for 6 months, so see where I am in another 6 months.
Well, you'll never get good enough to perform with an outside audience.
Possibly. I may not reach that. I mean, that might take actually a lot of commitment to actually be playing with, like, a little trio or something. I might not get that unless I practice yet for a couple of years and then hope I don't get arthritic or something. So that may not never happen. But at least I know I'm trying. If I don't try, I told my husband when I was wanting to order I found out you could rent one. I said, I know it sounds silly and stupid, but if I don't try, I'll always wonder, like, could I have played that thing? If I wait too long, I won't be able to. So at least I know I'm trying.
Thanks, Brooke, for helping us deliver this method, imaginal exposure method of field fantasy. And I'd like to check in after doing that and just see, how did that feel for you, Carol? Did you feel like you were responding well enough to these fears? Did you feel like the fears had the upper hand?
Yeah, no, it felt kind of good to fight back a little bit, and use a little acceptance paradox, right? And then be like, well, I'm going to do it anyway. Like, it's okay. It's not a bad thing. It's good if it's good for my soul kind of thing, it's good. So
that's what I was noticing, that you were moving away from the should statements. I should be good. I should perform outside my appetite. I shouldn't be silly, etc. And you were talking about what you wanted. And I think when we shift from what we should or shouldn't to what we want, that we're on much more solid footing. We're no longer dealing in the realm of distorted thinking. We're just dealing in the realm of reality. Hey, I want to do this. I'm curious about this. I want to see what that will be like. How anxious are you feeling right now about actually playing for us?
I'd say I'm probably at about a 5.
Okay. So the empathy had a bit of an effect size. The imaginal exposure to pure fantasy had a larger size, which is what I would expect. And I'm wondering, are you ready to stand and deliver or sit and deliver? Or not? I've never seen a vibraphone, so I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, we might as well give it a shot because I don't want to run out of time and not be able to get the opportunity. So hang on, I've got to get up out of this low couch. A little bit easier to play that way. And you'll probably recognize the song. All right, so this is can you guys see this? It's kind of like a xylophone. I don't have it plugged in. You can make the resonators have a vibrato, but I didn't want to do that on this song. So anyway, we'll see if I can get through the song. So brace your ears because I'll probably goof up.
Thank you, Carol, for performing for us. How are you feeling right now?
Well, a little embarrassed, but like I got through it. And no one dropped off, even though we're torturing your ears with mistakes. At least I was able to like keep going, get back on track. But I mean, for it to be performance ready, I'd have to have a lot less nerves.
Yeah, I was glad that you started over and ran into that thing that you were afraid of running into, making mistakes, basically. So you got exposure to the performance itself, but also to the specific parts of the performance that were driving that anxiety for you. We'd love to do a little remeasurement right now. You said you're feeling a bit embarrassed. What would be your number for embarrassment right now? 4. Okay, so that came down about 2/3. How anxious are you feeling right now?
Probably a 4.
That came down a bit as well. How much excitement are you feeling about playing for others?
Probably a 5.
Okay. And how much frustration that you are who you are?
Probably a 7.
Okay. And we noticed that vulnerability might be another form of anxiety, vulnerable to criticism, such as the ones you're giving with. How vulnerable are you feeling right now?
Probably about a 3.
Which was about where you wanted to end up. So it seems like the exposure is having an effect size. Would you want to play another song for us?
I can try.
Trying would be the very best. Playing magnificently would be second best. But attempting to play magnificently and making some mistakes, that would be as good as it would get.
Okay, this is a long piece, so I might not necessarily play the whole thing, but let me see if I can get through the first half. And again, you should recognize this one. I'm doing the 4 mallets because I need to challenge myself to do something that's a little more challenging. Okay, I muddled through the whole song. Now you're all on mute, so I can't hear you. You have to unmute.
Wonder, could we measure right now, Carol, how anxious you're feeling?
I'd say I'm at about a 2.5.
So that would suggest it was a dosing issue, that you just needed to do more exposure to keep those things coming down. How about the embarrassment?
I'd say that's at about a 2.
Well, that came way down. And how about frustration with yourself?
That's at about a 3.
Well, that came way down too. It's interesting. There's a response curve in the immune system. You get a vaccine and your immune system looks at it and goes, oh, marshals a response. But then the booster, it's a much bigger response because the system kind of knows what to do. So the curve goes, and it seems like something like that's happening with exposure. The first round, there was some decrease. Second round, it's like falling off a cliff. And my guess would be if we had time to continue doing this, you could very well hit all of those targets that you had set for yourself. But you can do it virtually. You can host a session. You can invite your friends or family over. Jacob Tallery was helping a professional musician who had a lot of stage fright. And he set up his drum set down at a street corner in San Francisco and played the drums. And Jacob was the street hawker, and he would call everyone over. Hey, let's come watch this guy. He makes a lot of mistakes. Oh, he just made one. Did you see it? So he did this massive exposure to this professional person's sphere. So you can do exposure anywhere. But maybe we can open it up before we say goodbye and just give other colleagues an opportunity to tell you what's happening for them as we do this work together.
Sure.
I kind of feel like I'm on the verge of tears because it's just so inspiring to see someone doing something scary, like experiencing a fear, overcoming a fear, and also to see someone just doing something they want to do just because they want to do it. Thank you.
Thanks, Patricia.
Yeah, I agree with Patricia. I think it's just, I have so much admiration for you to just do something just because you love it, right? And to conquer your fears and do something silly or not silly. I think it's inspiring.
Thanks.
When you were doing the imaginal exposure at the very end, you said to Patricia that, if I don't do it now, when am I going to do it? And just something just landed in me anyway. I was just like, that was really powerful. Something really resonated. And there you were doing it. Amazing. Thank you so much. I've learned so much. Thank you.
Good, thanks.
I will take that with it, me, and apply it to the piano.
Awesome. Awesome.
I think we're experiencing something we sometimes call the chaperone effect when we're doing group work. There'll be one person doing the exposure, but others of us benefit. It's a form of imaginal exposure. We go, wow, if Carol can do that vibraphone, maybe I could do that with the piano. And it sounds as though, Carol, you have again blazed a trail forward here in the direction of going for what you want to go for. Also addressing those fears that would stand in the way of your moving into the kind of relationship to the instrument and to performance that you might prefer. So I would add my voice appreciation and thanks to the group's voice. Anything else you'd like to share with us or ask us, Carol, before we say goodbye this week?
I would say the part of the exposure work, I think that's helpful, is that I started telling myself, oh, well, you did that part well. Like, okay, they can see that you're developing some skill. Like, you might make mistakes, but they can see that you practiced. Like, it sounds very minimal, but, it's actually like I'm not just completely So once I know, like, oh, I could actually get through parts and do them correctly, it kind of builds that confidence a little bit.
I think you're behaviorally addressing such distortions as magnification, all or nothing thinking, discounting the positive, mental filter. And behaviorally, you're creating a data set that, well, I'm doing some stuff the way I want to be doing it here. Oh, cool. Which would help you address those thoughts. I'm just going from bad to worse or something like that. I think when it comes to anxiety, our behavioral talking back is the most convincing form. It's helpful to do cognitive therapy, but it's behaving that creates that real world data that can then help us survive at those emotional levels that we were hoping to be at.
Yeah, you're articulated it in therapy terms that is helpful. I'm just, kind of just talking as the patient, but all of that makes sense.
Well, heartfelt thanks to you, Carol. I'm excited for you. I think you're starting the vibraphone at the perfect age. And I'm already looking forward to sitting in again and hearing you play and improve and continue to make errors. Then I'll know you're on the right track.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, everybody, for helping me out today. I really, really appreciate it. And I know my piano, I told my vibraphone teacher about this, and she was all excited. Did you do the thing yet? I'm like, no, I couldn't do it because I had to host. So she'll be glad to see if it has an outsized effect. So
maybe you can give us an update next week. Let us know how this work you've done here today has traveled with you over the next 7.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Or maybe, an encore performance.
You might have to wait some time for that.
We'd be willing to wait.